Thank you for joining us for the Conformed to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays, and with me is Jay Jones.
Hello. Good morning.
Well, that was a little bit different.
Yeah.
This is Text-Driven Tuesday, and we talked about not having Text-Driven Tuesday over the summer.
Yeah,
but
because we have a different people preach.
But Jay preached such a bizarre sermon yesterday that we thought it might be helpful if we talked about it a little bit more.
Yeah, because the truth is out there.
The truth is out there, and that was the X-Files theme song.
Yeah, people may not know what the X-Files is, but
X-Files 90s. When was the last season of that?
I don't know.
Did it make it into the 2000s? I think it did.
I don't. It may have had
Early
a reboot,
2000.
like a reboot or something for a final season. Yeah.
I remember watching it, like you, on Friday nights with my dad, and I was in high school, so that's late 90s.
Yeah, I guess it had a good.
But
run.
that was still kind of early in the series, so it probably made it into the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about the sermon that Jay preached on Sunday here at Christ Fellowship Church, and of course want to encourage you to go back and listen to the sermon. It was on Ephesians chapter 6, verses 10 through 12. And what before we get into the sermon itself, and this has the potential of becoming a mega episode if we don't if we start chasing rabbits, but why this sermon?
All right, so and then people will get why the X-Files theme song too, right? So the government has acknowledged the existence of what used to be called UFOs, right? They changed the name now. They call them UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon. So I don't know why they changed the name, but they changed the name.
Probably because UFO sounds
it's
completely wacky.
A cultural stigma to it.
It does.
Yeah. So what has occurred is that over the past year, a couple of videos have been leaked, and they're taken by fighter pilots, and it's clearly that don't know what it is, but it's been recorded by our technology. Not only has it been recorded, multiple times by multiple sensors, but it's been seen by multiple pilots. They weren't alone when they saw it. Some of them took pictures of it with their phones even.
Yeah. This has become so public and accepted that you sent me the 60 Minutes segment. They actually had a segment on 60 Minutes. Like, this is not fringe.
Right.
This is not fringe news sources. This isn't Alex Jones, right? This is 60 Minutes. They actually have a segment where they're interviewing people that have actually seen this stuff, and they're military.
Yep, they have. So the Senator Marco Rubio, he's taking the approach of, hey, there's apparently stuff that is not our stuff.
Yeah.
It's way advanced. So he did a little sneak. And the COVID relief bill, the $3 trillion, it was insane 5,500 page thing. He snuck in a little a little side deal like they always do, a little extra something, because nobody reads stuff anyway.
Yeah.
And in that it said that the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense, and the NSA, whatever, they had to put together a classified brief to Senate, some committee, right? But then they also would have to release to the American public everything they could related to UFOs, which they call UAPs. So that happened last 2 weeks. The classified within the unclassified version pretty much just says of 144 recorded encounters, we can answer what one of them is.
Okay.
Right? There was it was like some balloon or weather balloon or something, but the others they can't. So here, some of the stuff that they saw and that were recorded on radar, and there are other sensors, I guess, that they can't tell us how they recorded it because they don't want our enemies to know we have whatever capabilities. But starting in 2004, I hesitate to say objects because we don't really know. Is it an object? Is it technology? We talk about that later, but that's usually where we go. That's where they all went.
Yeah.
Something,
It's something.
something that can materialize and dematerialize.
Yeah.
Like phase in and out of our reality, and then it can go 13,000 miles an hour, like instantly with no propulsion device, like observable propulsion, like change 90 degrees also, like immediately. So it's violating all the laws of physics. Can do the same thing underwater. So it's almost like one person described it. It's like this thing is sliding through like space-time, not disturbing the air or water. But it can be captured on radar and thermal imaging and all kinds of stuff, And they've taken pictures of it with their phone, and it's crazy, man. So Senator Marco Rubio's thing was like, this is a possible threat.
Right.
Who cares about the stigma? We need to find out what's going on.
Right.
So he did a little sneak and forced.
He's what, the chair of the defense?
Yeah, he's something like that. And so now it's kind of a huge step. I mean, to acknowledge
right.
this stuff that's out there. So everybody needs to apologize for making fun of all the tinfoil hat wearing people out there, right? So
okay, so this is weird.
Yeah.
Okay.
Super weird, yeah.
Hopefully people haven't turned it off. They're like,
hopefully not. Hopefully,
it was good while it lasted. So there is something that they're picking up. The 60 Minutes segment, they showed some of the declassified videos.
Yep.
And there's something that's moving around.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is. Why does this matter? Why? Okay, we come to church on a Sunday morning. We're singing these great songs. We sang "It Is Well," and we sang these great songs, right? Ancient of Days. Had a pastoral prayer, extolling the greatness of God, and then you get up and start talking about aliens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why does this matter?
Okay, so the intro of this will help people to understand. So a couple of things I think will happen when people see this, well, at least Westerners, Western churchgoers.
Let me before you do that, let me ask you a question. Okay. So we've got military here in America that are seeing this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not ours.
Right.
The Pentagon is saying it's not ours.
Yeah.
Right. Have other countries experienced the same stuff? Like, are we sure that this isn't China messing with us?
There is a 99.9% chance that it's not human. I mean, you can't ever say 100. Who knows, right? But it's pretty near certain it's not. Yeah, these things have been observed pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
But the problem is in 2004 is when they'll admit to first seeing it.
Okay.
That's one of those leaked videos. And in 2004, we're like 20 years militarily ahead of China and Russia.
Okay.
We know that. So we're the best there is in the world. And it's far beyond anything we ever dream of. And so we know, like, it's likely not human.
Okay.
Right. But they won't say that.
So they'd have to
in the report, they won't come right out and say that.
So this would have to be like Red Skull finding alien technology, right? To suddenly boost.
Yeah, he found the Tesseract.
The Tesseract to have this technological explosion, right? Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that, like, this isn't. It's probably not possible that this is some other country that has suddenly taken this huge leap.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think what happens is, has the potential to happen is for Christians to see it and say, well, the Bible never addresses anything like this, and so you start to doubt the Bible. Like, is the Bible trustworthy? Is can I believe in any of this? Like you'd think something this big, like God would have spoken about it. And the reason I think that happens is because we have become materialist. We've been conditioned in that fashion, like not in the sense that we like material things,
Mm-hmm.
like we are. Though many Americans are in that sense materialist, but philosophical materialism,
Right.
where you only really believe in what can be tested with the scientific method.
Right.
So the natural world really is all that there is. What we can observe,
empirical
yeah,
evidence,
what we
right?
can observe using the five senses
Mm-hmm.
and test it, and we have been conditioned to this way over so like the past 100 years at least, since the Enlightenment happened, and probably more than 100 years. Here we are. We've arrived. Christians will affirm God. That's supernatural, right? Will affirm the supernatural in some sense. God, Jesus, the Incarnation, the Trinity, heaven. But when we start talking about things like what we're seeing, like we're seeing something that can't be explained, the place we initially go is not toward, hey, what's a Bible answer? We fall back into our conditioning, and I think the dots that are connected are that must be technology, and technology is made by like intelligent beings,
Mm-hmm.
right? Intelligent beings must be far advanced, like they're way more advanced than we are. They can break the laws of the universe with these things. Aliens,
Right.
aliens from somewhere else in the universe. God never talked about super intelligent beings from other parts of the universe,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore, like, I can't really. Is the Bible worldview collapses? Like, can I even trust the Bible?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. That we hear of this stuff, and we immediately say that this has to be made by some carbon-based being
Right.
from the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So that's my worry, right? So I'm thinking, okay, what can I do to head that off
Mm-hmm.
for anyone in our church
Okay.
to reaffirm sufficiency of Scripture alone? I think the Bible speaks to all of this. And what's very interesting though about this is it's messing with the worldview of like atheists and agnostics too, because they're hardcore materialists,
Right.
but many of them, they're more scientific than probably most Christians are, everyday Christian, and they realize, okay, this is the laws of the universe are being broken here, and they're like, and then their dots are, the universe is too big for another civilization. That's what they're acknowledging. And if you could travel the speed of light, like by the time you get here, you're like old and dead. That's how big the universe is. And so they say, well, this is possibly interdimensional beings. They use that terminology, interdimensional beings. But then they also realize, well, hold up, now I've crossed into the realm of supernatural, because that's what they're talking about now cannot be tested or verified.
Right.
You can't use science to test, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're talking about supernatural things, and
Okay.
that kind of bothers them. But for them, it's like, is that the best explanation? I mean, they can see it. You can look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ephesians 6:10 through 12, puts I think it puts right out there in front the Bible's worldview and cosmology,
Yeah.
which can answer this. There's a place for this what we cannot explain,
Yeah.
and it can fit in with what what God's already revealed.
Okay.
And that's what this passage, I think, the strength of this passage.
Okay. So you want to go ahead and read that passage, and then we'll talk about the sermon, and we'll be kind of bringing some more of this into the sermon, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'll read it. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places.
Okay. So you had three theological truths to bolster our faith and to evangelize.
To help us evangelize.
Right. So the three theological truths is there's a biblical cosmology, right? There's the reality of supernatural evil, and then that there's strategies of the evil one,
Mm-hmm.
right? All right. Well, let's just talk about this biblical cosmology, because we're talking about that. You're going to see, if you watch these videos, you can go on YouTube and watch the 60 minutes segment. It's like an 8-minute long segment, and you can see these videos, and the first thing that people will think is space aliens.
Right.
Okay, that could be an explanation, but
Well, we've been conditioned over.
right, we've been conditioned to immediately think that, right? But the Bible presents a cosmology that has room for this type of phenomenon,
Right.
right? So what is that? What do we see in this passage that explains kind of this biblical cosmology? Maybe define cosmology in case people don't know what that means.
Your cosmology is what you believe about reality, about the universe. So take the materialist cosmology, those that would say they're skeptics,
Mm-hmm.
the Scullys, right? Mulder is in the X-Files; he's a believer.
Uh-huh.
The supernatural. Scully, she's a skeptic. She's she's a scientist, and so they go out investigating paranormal activity, and she's like, I don't believe there's a scientific explanation to all of this, to everything.
Yeah.
By the end of the show, her cosmology collapses. Right. That's kind of how it all. But it takes like a million seasons. But the cosmology for the materialists, it's all there is the universe, and that's it. And only thing that we can observe and test, and there's no supernatural. So for them, there's no God. There's no Jesus, no miracles. None of that. The universe is a cosmic accident, given the laws of the universe. They say this is a nonsense, stupid statement, but they say, given the laws of the universe will and must create itself from nothing.
Right.
It's one of the dumbest statements ever.
All right.
But that's truly what they hold to. There's nothing but the universe.
Yeah.
The Bible, the biblical cosmology, on the other hand, is what we would say corresponds with reality. We'd say they're believing untruth. We believe in reality.
Mm-hmm.
God, the only one who can tell you the nature of reality, is the one that was there when everything began. And so our cosmology starts with God, who has existed eternally as in three persons, one God in three persons, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, before there was ever such a thing as time or space or anything. And it stretches our mind to even think of that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even say, well, how long was God like that? Right? Because there's no time.
Right.
There's no time.
Yeah.
God hasn't created anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we can say God is love, because God has eternally lived that way and been happy in himself.
Mm-hmm.
The Father and the Son loving each other, the Holy Spirit, and they all are in this community, this relationship of love, one God in three persons. And out of an overflow, I think you should think of creation as an overflow of God's goodness, of that greatness of who he is.
Right.
He doesn't create because he needs people to love. He's already satisfied in himself.
Yeah.
And so that overflow of love is creation. And he's created people, beings, so that they can behold how great he is, and they can experience his love as well. And so God creates the universe. Now, if you come to this passage, I think what is clear that you can read, and we'll have to go back to the beginning of the Bible to get it, but the biblical cosmology is that the universe is in conflict. That's the nature of the universe, is conflict.
So I think this is going to get into angelology, our doctrine of angels, which people probably don't even, that may be new for a lot of people. They may not even have a theological category for this. They just, the Bible talks about angels, but they haven't really thought about what that means.
Right.
And I think both of us were in that place also. I know I was. It was helpful to read Doug Van Dorn's The Angel of the Lord. I know you've been reading Michael Heiser's What the Supernatural Realm, is that what it's called? So there's some books out there that are starting to, I think, expand our understanding of this biblical cosmology.
Yeah.
That there is, I guess, do we want to call it like another dimension?
You could use the term realm.
Yeah,
or
there is a
dimen-
there is a spiritual realm,
Yeah.
and when people hear that term spiritual, they think of ghost, like
Right.
wisp of
Yeah.
smoke, and
Yeah.
it's not. They have this, like it's not physical, it's spiritual,
Right.
and I think we need to get past that. Spiritual is not the antithesis of physical.
Right.
So angels
Are created.
are
beings.
created beings,
Yes.
and they're spiritual, they're heavenly, but they also are physical.
Right.
Now we don't have all the explanation about what that means.
Yeah.
But an angel, so let's just take, Gabriel. We know
Mhm.
Gabriel is an angel.
Yeah.
He's actually given a name in the New Testament.
Mhm.
He's this messenger angel.
Mhm.
At this moment, Gabriel is someplace,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like
yeah.
he's not this wisp of smoke that just, exists in this weird dimension. Like he has to be in a place because he is a being. He is a creature.
Right.
So he is someplace.
Yes.
And when we say someplace, that means that it is a place, right?
Right.
So there
Yeah.
is some kind of realm beyond this realm where there are beings, there are persons who exist in a time space location.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. That's right. You should think of, in your biblical cosmology, when God creates, he creates everything.
Right.
And that includes the spiritual realm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's our realm or our dimension. It's what we call the physical, and it's inhabited by persons.
Yeah.
Well, there's another realm. Colossians 1:16 tells us that Jesus created everything that
Right.
exists.
Right.
And he created everything. It's all created by him and for him. But the terms used there are the visible and the invisible.
Right.
And that tells us, hey, there are at least two places.
Yeah.
There's this place, the visible,
And when he says invisible, he means to us.
invisible to us. Right.
not that it's invisible
You're right.
to them.
We
Right.
don't have access to this other place,
Right.
realm, unless God intervenes and
Mhm.
through some supernatural means, which he has.
Right.
We can talk about that.
And we
a
know
couple
that
times.
these angels, they have form
Mhm.
because angels have come into the visible realm,
Yeah,
right?
they have.
And when they come into the visible realm, we've talked about Genesis 6. Like they had some kind of body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That they interacted with human women.
Right.
Genesis chapter 18. Abraham lifts up his eyes and he sees 3 men.
Mm-hmm.
2 of them are angels. The third one is the Son of God,
Mm-hmm.
but they have physical form.
Yeah.
They eat.
They eat.
Right? They eat.
They talk.
They talk. You can communicate with
They're
them.
not doing they're not doing psychic like
Right. Yeah, it's not telepathy.
telepathy.
They open their mouths.
Their tongue
and
agitates the airwaves.
they are interacting with the visible.
Right.
They take up space.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They go down to Sodom and Gomorrah. They interact with Lot. They actually can grab him and drag him out of the city. Like they actually are interacting.
Mm-hmm.
And we see this all throughout the Old and the New Testament.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the angel of the Lord, and this is where we could just start chasing.
Yeah. Right.
That's right. The angel of the Lord, the second person of the Trinity, he interacts with people all the time. Like he
Mhm.
actually appears to people.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the language that's used.
Yeah.
When the word of the Lord appears
Right.
to Abraham
Uh-huh.
in a vision
And said.
and says,
Right.
right? Abraham is not hearing this disembodied voice. He's seeing someone who's talking to him.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Genesis 15. He, the Lord, takes him outside.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's not just sleepwalking.
Yeah.
Like he actually is seeing someone who's saying, "Come outside and let me
Right.
show you this." So there is and these are spiritual beings who have physical form.
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't think they just take on form when they enter our realm
Right.
either.
It's not
Like-
not instant creation of a body and then
Right.
they disappear.
Like
They've got some kind of form.
Right. Yeah. There's something. What's the technical term? There's an essence to them.
Right.
Right. Like the philosophy. What is a chair? What is the essence of a chair? What
Right.
is the essence of a man,
Right.
of a body? A man.
Yeah.
Whatever they have some type of a body. And the body can traverse the realms or the dimensions.
Yeah.
Like they're interdimensional beings.
Right.
We'll use the terminology of that's being used today. Angels and their various classes are interdimensional beings. So not only can they interact in this realm. I mean, in the Bible, angels make warfare. They kill humans.
Right.
They talk with people. They eat with people. Touch people. Influence all kinds of things. But also sometimes people are taken through like the veil into the other realm.
Yeah.
They talk there.
Right.
Like, how do you talk if you're a floaty mist thing? They're not doing, again, not ESP.
Yeah.
This is another place we don't have access to. It's not like our place. It's different.
Yeah.
We don't know a lot about it, but they have form there too.
Wait,
they're described as having form.
Right.
Like, what do they look like? Well, they have 6 wings and
Yeah.
they're flying. They're
in-
singing to God. They're
in,
singing
in
to
Job
God.
1 and 2, when the angels gather together and Satan also comes, they're in a place.
They're able
right.
to recognize each other.
Yeah. Right.
Like, what floaty mist is this?
as we're talking, I'm thinking an interesting story to kind of illustrate this is the story of Balaam and his donkey.
Mm-hmm.
He's riding on his donkey, and the angel of the Lord is standing in the way, and the donkey can see him. Balaam can't,
Yeah.
but he's there,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like he's there, but he's in the invisible realm where Balaam can't see him, but the donkey can.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of that story, Balaam's eyes are open and he sees him.
Yeah.
That's not when he's actually there. He's there already.
Yeah.
But Balaam is given
There's
the
another story
ability
like
to
that.
see that
Who
he's
is
there.
Is it Elijah? Where he says, "Open your eyes," or in the guy,
The armies,
and he opens his eyes, and
the
there's like
angelic
angels
army.
everywhere.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So same type of thing. So they have form. They're different classes. There's apparently just regular, like Gabriel messenger angels look like man. There are other angels that look really weird, like multiple heads and I don't think it's just symbology.
Yeah.
I think these are creatures that are, what Peter calls them glorious ones, right?
Right.
There's classes, so from like a regular to different authorities apparently, and there's apparently different levels of power too. That they are able to wield.
And we see that in the text, right?
Yeah. We don't know exactly how the classes are breaking down, but there's diversity among these type of persons. It may be weird for people to think of them as persons, but they are persons with some type of mind and intelligence.
Conscience.
They're self-aware. They know who they are, like we know who we are.
There couldn't have been a rebellion, and we'll get to that in just a minute. There couldn't have been a rebellion without them having a conscience.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
That they actually are conscious beings who can have choice.
Yep.
Right? They make choices.
Yeah. We know they're cherubim, seraphim, regular angels, seraphim. We don't know exactly what that is like, but they're
the
burning
seraphim
ones.
means the burning ones, right?
Yeah, and it also can have connotation of some type of serpentine being. I mean, this world, this realm that we don't have access to is inhabited by all kinds of creatures that God made. So when God created everything, He created, and both of these realms exist, right? They can traverse into ours. They're interdimensional beings. We are not. We cannot go there. But people have gone there by God's direct action. Enoch was taken up. Elijah's taken up in a chariot of fire, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Like, is that just symbology to tell you, like, or is Elisha trying to say in human terms what's in his, which we can't describe,
Yeah.
right? So chariot of fire,
Right.
like a transportation device of some type,
Right.
taking a human into another dimension.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to think about. But there's also a third place, and I think this is important. There's a place which is called the third heaven, which Paul said he was taken up to, but I can't tell you about, which always really bothers me because I'm like, why bring it up?
It's like in Revelation where John hears the seven thunders and then he writes that he was told he can't
Yeah, I
explain
can't.
the
Yeah,
seven thunders. Like why even tell us this?
yeah. But this place is God's presence, and I think this is when Jesus says, "Today you'll be with me in paradise." It's the part of where when people die, the abode of the dead. Sheol has two parts, but there's a part of the universe that is God's presence. It's the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah.
Like we're taught to pray that God's will would be done on earth as it is done in heaven. That's the third heaven, because God's will is not done in this other spiritual place.
Mm-hmm.
This other realm is in rebellion against God. That takes us back to bridge us to the fall. Like after God created everything and everything was good, there was rebellion in this spiritual world, this place that we don't have access to. That rebellion and conflict came over into our realm.
Mm-hmm.
When the serpent, that's all we know about him at that time, the serpent deceives the woman. Adam stands there like a little coward and goes along with everything. And then we become rebels as well. These angelic beings were in rebellion in the spiritual world, but now it's bled into our world. And so both places now are places of conflict. And that's what God promises. He promises a conflict. From that point on, there will be a conflict. And the conflict is going to be between the serpent and the seed of the woman. And that's kind of the trajectory the whole Bible follows, is this storyline of conflict,
Right.
of this war, this cosmic war that's going to unfold. But God also promises that he's going to destroy the serpent, the one who has plunged both realms into rebellion against God. And he's going to do it through this coming promised one that we don't know that much about yet in the beginning of the Bible.
Yeah.
And so there's a promised victory as well. And so that when you come to this passage, that's what you see. You see a world, a universe that contains multiple realms and beings of the human type and the supernatural type. And it's a conflict.
Yeah.
And we're told, Paul tells the Ephesians and the Christians and us, put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to stand. Take a stand like a soldier. You've got to turn. You can't turn and run. You've got to turn and fight against the devil, and against his schemes.
Yeah.
And so that's the biblical cosmology.
Right. And I think maybe a word of caution might be helpful, because as we're talking about this, there's a lot of room for speculation.
Yeah.
Like we can speculate about a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it's fun,
Right.
as long as we're not imposing things upon the text
Right.
that we don't know.
Yeah.
And so we want to be really careful. Like there's a reason why Paul warns the Colossians against angel worship.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you walk into a Christian bookstore and you're surrounded by ceramic angels, right? We have to be really careful to recognize that the angels are not they're not the main characters of the story.
Right.
When we get to Hebrews, we're going to see that in Hebrews chapter 1. The author of Hebrews takes
Yeah.
great pains to show that Jesus is not just another angel.
Right.
There is a wide chasm
Right.
between
Yeah.
the Son and the angels.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to be really careful not to spend all of our time on this endless speculation.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to make sure that we're avoiding that danger.
Right.
I mean, there's a pitfall that we can.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go to two extremes. On the one, you can forget that there is this reality. On the other, you can make this reality too all important
Mm-hmm.
to what God has revealed to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, He hasn't revealed a whole lot of details about
Right.
this other realm,
Yeah.
and He hasn't told us a whole lot about the angels.
Right.
We know they're ministering spirits. We know we're going to get into there's good angels and bad angels.
Yep.
Right. But beyond that, he hasn't really told us very much.
Right. Yeah. We
Like,
don't know.
We know seraphim means burning ones,
Mm-hmm.
and it's one of I think the root is the same as serpent.
Yeah.
So there's all kinds of speculation
There
right
is,
now that we could just spend all of our time talking about. But we want to make sure that we don't go crazy,
Right.
right? But the main point that you're trying to make here is that we have to be aware that there is this reality,
Right.
that there is this other realm, and it's real. And it actually does matter because
Right.
of the conflict.
Right.
Like we can't just be blissfully ignorant of the fact that there are spiritual realities behind us, or else why is Paul writing this in the first place?
Right. Like these and this is the strength of the Bible too, and why you can use all of these points to evangelize the world. Each one of them you can use because they're like, well, this doesn't fit my materialist worldview, and then they go, well, maybe they're interdimensional beings, right?
Right.
That's what they appear to be. They can phase in and out of our reality,
Okay.
and like, oh, you guys are 2,000 years late. Or more, right? You're more than 2,000 years late because God's already told us about this.
Right.
We've been believing this all along.
Yeah.
That there are interdimensional beings that can enter our reality. Right? So we're ahead of you. And, and welcome on over. Come see what else the Bible tells us about,
So before we get to point 2, we need to get to point 2, but before we get there, we've been talking about these weird objects that have been flying around.
Right.
How do we view this in light of this supernatural reality? Are we saying that this is supernatural? Is that, I mean, again, it's kind of speculating, but what would you say? Like, if someone were to watch this video, should we just say, well, this is supernatural? Should we say this is
Well, I can't tell you exactly what. I mean, no one can tell you exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But when things break the laws of the universe, you've entered the realm of the supernatural, whether you want to admit it or not. Like the laws of physics are being broken before your eyes.
Right.
We used to call those miracles.
Yeah.
But we're too advanced now to say miracles.
Okay.
So we'll come up with all kinds of other jargon.
Okay.
We'll even tap into the sci-fi, right?
Right.
People will do anything to not admit the obvious of what's happening.
Yeah.
They'll be like, well, they're so advanced, maybe they're time travelers, right? They've figured out how to break the laws of physics.
Yeah.
And they're here. What you're seeing is them tapping into our reality from a future timeline. Right?
Right. Okay, maybe we'll get back to this
That's the type of stuff people will say. But I mean, I think a biblical explanation could be angels have the ability to enter our realm. They've been doing it for a long time. How they do it, we don't know. Like, okay, God, Jesus, they can do it at will with their own person. Yeah. But there are no people like God. Yeah. Right? God's not bound by time or space or anything. It's reasonable to believe that angels are bound by time and space in some capacities, some way.
They had a beginning.
Yeah. So do they use some type of technology to enter our realm? I don't know. No one really knows. Right? Yeah. I'm just saying it's a possibility. And for me, I think it's more likely than all the other explanations. I think what we're probably seeing are angelic activity of some type.
Maybe we'll get back to that when we get to point 3.
Okay.
And we can maybe ask a few more questions. So let's go. So that's a biblical cosmology. There is a spiritual realm, and Paul writes about it here. He writes about it in Colossians. Where we see it all through the scripture that this is not metaphor. When we hear the prophets seeing visions, that doesn't mean they're not seeing something that's real. They're being allowed to see the invisible made visible.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So the second theological truth is that there is the reality of supernatural evil. And you've already kind of introduced that that there is a devil, right? But we don't really take that seriously. You don't really believe in a personal devil, do you, Jay?
Yeah. And this is more of a Western problem, though. I promise you, people in the East and in other parts of the world that haven't been influenced by the Enlightenment, they don't have a problem believing in supernatural evil. Yeah, they don't. This is a Western deal. We've outgrown this. like the belief in the supernatural, that was in our infancy, as if you're speaking intellectually.
Yeah.
And we as Westerners, we've grown up now, George, finally, and we realize that, supernatural and miracles aren't real. God's not real. And the devil, the devil isn't real either. There's no such thing as a real devil or Satan. This is just part of.
He's a boogeyman, right?
Yeah.
To make little kids behave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it's like there's a character of him. I mean, the pitchfork guy,
Yeah.
Red guy, cartoony,
Mm-hmm.
They even make shows about him now where he's like, what do they call it? Anti-hero?
Right.
Like there's a show called Lucifer or something. I haven't watched it.
Yeah.
But
he's the protagonist of
he's
of
not,
the story. Yeah.
This is not the one we're talking about.
No.
Right.
No, it is not.
And what's interesting is to see people.
So we know a little bit more about this spiritual being than we know about any of the other spiritual beings. We
do
get some snapshots of this one, right?
We do. Yeah. I mean, when we go to the end in Revelation, I mean, we're kind of told like, hey, he's the dragon, calls him the dragon,
right.
The ancient serpent. I wonder who that could be. Maybe the one in Genesis 3. Right. He's called the dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, and Satan.
Which is interesting when we start talking about seraphim as these burning ones who maybe look like serpents. When John says he sees a dragon, he may not be talking in symbols.
He may not be.
Like Satan may be a burning one.
Right.
When you think of a burning serpent, what does your mind immediately go to?
Yeah.
It goes to a dragon, right?
Right.
Like there is a reason why he's talked about as a serpent in Genesis 3, but he also is able to talk. Like people struggle with this. Like, is he possessing a serpent? Is this metaphor? Maybe he is a talking serpent.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
If you see this burning one, telling you if you eat this, you'll be like God. Maybe Eve would be like, oh yeah, I can trust this one.
Right.
He's obviously different.
He's super being.
Yeah.
I mean, the seraphim, they're close to God's throne. Like they're right there, as close as you can get, I guess. And they, they kind of shield themselves from the holiness of God. They sing, and I mean, we even with him though, we don't know a lot.
Right.
But the reason people struggle with the reality of supernatural evil, where in the West where we live, is because, like I said, we've outgrown it, and we think there's we think we have answers for everything, right? So we have psychology to help individuals when they have individual problems, and psychology can solve everything that's wrong with you. Everything that's wrong in society can be solved through sociology, if we apply the right education, give people the right economic opportunities. So there are varying systems of and theories of what's best, what economies are best, what will best pull us out of all of our caveman activity.
Right. Evil is just kind of an illusion, right? It's not real.
It can all be fixed through education, psychology, all of this, and this is what has been believed forever, right? Since the Enlightenment, and the past 100 years, how that has played out. Even kind of agnostic people are acknowledging, why is there still evil around? Haven't we come up with ways to fix all of this stuff?
Right.
Like, why is it still here? Why are we still having these problems? There's a book that was written called The Death of Satan, written by a skeptic from Columbia University, Andrew Del Banco, and the book just begins with this sentence: "A gulf has opened up in our culture between the visibility of evil and the intellectual resources available for coping with it." So that just tells you right off the bat. Then there's all these evils listed. Some of them I can't even read on here; they're so bad. But the problem is that people are grappling with is, I thought we had all the answers.
Yeah. And
they're beginning to see we don't. Maybe there is evil. I heard Tim Keller talk about this once. He was using the Silence of the Lambs. Do you remember on the Silence of the Lambs when Agent Starling, that's her name, right? Clarice
Starling,
meets Hannibal Lecter. and he's talking to her, and she says something like, "What happened to you?" And he's like, "What happened to me? I happened." And he's like, "Look at me." And he's like, "Can you bear to think in your mind that I am evil?" Right? Because in her mind, she's a psychologist.
Right.
She's like, "Well, what happened to you to make you become like this?" And
Yeah.
he's like, "No, I happened. It's who I am." And
yeah, the unbelievers, atheists, they have answers to the minor social ills, but they don't have they have no answer to massive evil, like real, like Holocaust. Like they don't have an answer to that level of evil. Serial killers and terrorists. That 9/11, they can't explain that level of evil.
Or what is the book? Like in the Brothers K, when he's Brothers Cosmonov, the book where he's describing the things that the evils of communism and how they would, for fun, throw babies up in the air and catch them on bayonets. You can't describe that.
Right.
How does that evil come into the world? There's no explanation except for that there is actually real supernatural evil.
Right.
There really is. There is supernatural evil in the world. And the Bible says the world is under the influence of this mega powerful being. That's the best way to describe Satan is a mega powerful, hyper intelligent, shrewd, deceitful, evil, interdimensional being.
Right.
A being able to traverse both realms. That's in rebellion and hates God.
He hates God, and so he hates us.
He hates the image of God.
Yeah.
Hates God, hates his image bearers. He literally is like, do you remember Alfred, what he says to Batman? They're talking in the cave. He's trying to grapple with the Joker. And he's like, tells him that story of like South America or whatever. And he goes, why was he doing it? And he said, you don't get it. Some people just want to watch the world burn.
Right.
That's Satan.
Right. Yeah.
He just wants to watch the world burn.
And
he's real. 2 Corinthians 4:4 calls him the God. That would be little g, the God of this world. Jesus calls him the ruler of this world. 1 John 5:19 says the whole world lies under the power of the evil one. You can't explain it all away, right?
Right.
It doesn't mean that he is directly causing every bad thing that happens, but in some sense, his influence extends over every nation and person, even every person in the world that has not been rescued by Christ.
Yeah.
That the gospel has gone to, and that the terminology that is used is, we've been rescued from the domain of darkness and brought into his marvelous light. Right. And Paul, same author here, earlier in Ephesians, he describes us as being a child of wrath like the rest of mankind, under the influence.
Following the prince of the power of the air.
The prince of the power of the air.
Right.
Another terminology for Satan. And psychology can't rescue from that.
Right.
There's no psychology and no education. There's nothing that can get mankind out of that.
Yeah.
What's required is a supernatural rescue.
Yeah.
That is what Christ does for us, as he rescues us from his power.
Yeah.
And when you've been rescued from that power, that's what Ephesians is about. The gospel is explained in very glorious terms, like high-level theology of election and being blessed with all this inheritance, and being through Christ's resurrection and our unity with Christ, our oneness with Christ, being placed up in the heavenly places with him. And then he says, now that you're a Christian, here's how you live as a Christian. But after he says all of that, he comes here and he says, oh, by the way, you're now engaged in a cosmic war.
Right.
I saved the last part. You're now engaged in a cosmic war against this mega powerful being.
Right.
So put on the whole armor of God so that you'll be able to stand against him.
Right.
So,
and I think it's important to again emphasize that that Satan is not the equal opposite of God.
right.
Like a lot of people, they view God on one side and Satan on the other, and it's like this cosmic tug of war.
Yeah,
And
there's
who's going to win? It's,
there's that-
it's polarized.
Have you seen that really corny painting? It's like like the devil like arm wrestling Jesus. Like, no,
Yeah,
his arm's getting snapped off in half.
right. So it's important for us to remember that.
Also, my dad at the end of it, he's like, "Hey, make sure when you talk about the thing, if you do your podcast, make sure people know that he's not omnipresent."
Yes,
'Cause
he is a creature.
Because people think that.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, the devil's everywhere,"
Yeah.
but he's not.
No.
He has some type of being, and he's located in a place. Like he's somewhere in the universe right now.
Yes, he has to be someplace.
Right.
He can't just be extended everywhere. He doesn't. He's not all knowing. Now he's like you said, hyper intelligent. I mean, he's been around a long time. He's been around long enough. He knows how humans work.
He's like a chess player, but on the world stage.
Right. So he is hyper intelligent, and hyper malevolent.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's not everywhere. You and I probably have never come into contact with him.
Right.
But he also has a host of fallen angels,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Luther said
there are demons.
You know, Luther met him a few times. He said,
I would imagine that Luther, at that time, and what Luther was engaged in,
"Yeah,
I imagine that had the devil's attention.
should we tell him they're his preferred method of scaring him away?"
I think we have before.
Luther's crazy. Scares him away with a fart.
Yeah.
He's wild, man. He's wild.
Right.
I think that just shows. I mean, that's his disdain for the devil.
Right.
Is what he's getting at.
Right.
But I wouldn't doubt that he had, experienced him or met him.
Yeah.
Because of the grand scale of what was happening in the Reformation.
Yeah. And I think it's also important that Christians realize that they are no longer slaves. They've been set free.
Right.
Jesus talks about binding the strong man so he can plunder him.
Right.
That's what's going on.
Right.
That's what Jesus says is happening as he's casting out demons. That's what's happening. He's plundering the devil.
Yes.
Of his possessions throughout the nations, and as the gospel goes forth, Jesus is just he's just ransacking.
Yeah, we don't need to
the
fear
devil. We don't have to fear him. James even says if you resist the devil, he'll flee from you.
You resist the devil, he flees.
Right.
That's why you don't turn your back.
Right.
You face, you resist, he has to flee. And
So
and you don't need to fear. Think about it like this, George. Like we're the bride of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We're his. He purchased us with his blood.
Right.
We belong to him.
Yeah.
We're his possession, right? If you're going to come into my house and harm my wife, you're going to have to literally bind me.
right. You're going to have to incapacitate.
Well, but now we belong to Christ.
Yeah.
We belong to the most powerful being in existence.
Right.
The scale and level between Christ is the difference between like a gnat and a mega lion.
Okay.
A mega lion.
All right.
Like the different there's no contest. Like so we don't need to run around afraid.
Right.
Some people are like afraid, like,
Yeah, I think we see a kind of a full-orbed view of the devil in the New Testament. So first, we need to recognize that the death of Christ actually affected the power of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he says in John chapter 12, now is the ruler of this world cast out, right? Jesus could say, I saw Satan fall like lightning. But at the same time, we are not to blaspheme the glorious ones. Peter warns against that. So we need to respect the fact that they are powerful. We're to be on our guard, right? Because he roams around like a roaring lion, seeking whom he can devour. He wants Christians to be afraid, so he can devour them, right? But we're called to resist him. We see that in Ephesians chapter 6. I mean, what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to stand against the evil one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we have trust that through the death of Christ, Jesus says, Paul says in Colossians chapter 2 that through the cross, he's actually put these evil powers to open shame.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Now that's Jesus's work, not ours.
Right.
It's not ours to go around binding the devil.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Right. But we can trust the fact that through Jesus's work, the devil has been put to open shame.
Right.
And we don't have to fear him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He's not everywhere all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that even became a thing.
Yeah.
What's interesting to think about though is like he apparently can like move through.
Now if he
our
can
realm,
move,
right?
and now if he can move at 13,000 miles per hour,
I'm
he
sure
can.
he can.
he can get around.
Here's a sidebar. When he tempts Jesus, does he like teleport Jesus?
Yeah, I don't know.
What happens there? It's so mysterious.
Right.
Like, hey,
He takes him. He takes him
and,
from
like,
the wilderness to the
and
pinnacle of the temple.
It's in an instant.
Right.
He's there.
Yeah.
He just moves like so. He's got power of some type.
Right.
But yeah, he's not everywhere. He's located in a place.
And that again, it emphasizes what Jesus has done for us on the cross. That these powerful beings that hate us, we should be on our guard against them because he hates us even more now. Revelation chapter 12 says that he goes off to make war against the saints because he knows his time is short.
Right.
So we need to have a healthy respect for him. We can't just be like, devil can't touch me. Like
Yeah.
he has his schemes, and you can be tripped up and devoured. But because of what Christ has done, we are secure.
Right.
We're safe.
Yeah.
We don't have to worry that the devil is going to be able to snatch us out of his hand.
Well, we can't be taken back.
Right. But there are schemes, right? Schemes of the devil, and that's your third point. That there are strategies of this evil one, the supernatural evil one, and so let's talk about these. You had to scurry through these because it was 12 o'clock when you hit this point.
Yeah.
But this is, we need to understand that there are strategies to deceive people, and nothing's off the table, right?
Right.
So you divided these into the most common, the common, and then the very rare, right? So we are looking at the text, right? We're supposed to stand against the schemes of the devil. So let's talk about these.
Okay.
Let's talk about these. These are not harmless.
No. We
He's-
don't think about them near enough, I think.
Yeah, right.
If you're engaged in warfare, which is warfare language,
Yeah.
you're going to want to know the tactics of the enemy. Like what tactics and what capabilities will he try to employ against me?
Right.
And if you know them ahead, you're prepared.
Yeah.
And we're often not prepared. We just never think about it.
Okay. All right. So let's. If you talked about your own experience in the military, that you had to know the weapons,
Right.
the tactics of the evil,
Yeah,
evil
one-
ones,
one-
right?
yeah.
The enemies.
Yeah. Had to memorize like all of Russia's vehicles and what weapons could go on them and how they are likely to be employed. And we had to take the same type of care, like because this is for real. And he's like planning. And it doesn't have to be directly him, but the text also tells us that there are other beings
Right.
that are with him in this rebellion,
Uh-huh.
and they are together engaged to stop. I think they want to deceive as many people so that they don't hear the gospel and they aren't rescued. And he wants to destroy the church and to destroy the faith of Christians.
Right.
And so we should know what tactics he's likely to employ against us.
Okay. So let's talk about some of the most common ones.
Okay.
Some of the most common ones. These are the ones that we'll run into.
Yeah. And I think the most common theme that's been employed for history and that we are likely to run into is the what I kind of labeled the scheme of presenting a counter-truth to God's revealed word, a counter-truth to God's revealed word that seems plausible and desirable, right? And we see this in Genesis 3. That's how he tempts our first parents. Did God actually say? That's how it always begins. Did God actually say that?
Yeah.
No, no, no. Like what will actually happen, you won't really die. What will actually happen is you'll become like God.
Mhm.
Isn't that desirable?
Right.
Don't you want to be like God?
Mhm.
Which the whole irony and the twisted part of this is they're already like God.
Right.
They're the most like God created being in the universe.
Mhm.
They have His image.
Right.
Satan does not.
And that's speculation again, but I think it's the most probable explanation is that's probably why the devil rebelled in the first place. That he's a glorious one, right?
Right.
And then God makes man
And even
in
more,
his image,
and even more
an
glorious.
even more
one.
glorious one. And out of pride, he rebels
Mhm.
and he tempts Adam and Eve.
I
Right?
think it's again, we can't know for sure, but it's definitely a plausible explanation.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you say, and these counter narratives to the truth, would you say maybe materialism and like evolution would fit into this? Like here's this supernatural explanation for the world. Here's a more plausible that
Right.
even though it's ridiculous nonsense, the universe creates
Right.
itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Would that fall in this category?
I think it could. Yeah, it would fall into the terms that we use to describe these things are like meta narratives, right?
Right.
So here's a counter
Right.
meta narrative.
Yeah.
Here's a counter cosmology to what
A
God has said.
a worldview.
A whole different worldview than what God has said.
Okay.
And it even seems plausible, like the way it's explained, it seems like it could really be.
Right.
It's got to seem real.
Right.
It can't be
Right.
far-fetched. It's got to be close enough to deceive.
Though some of the materialist
Right.
explanations of
Right.
Space aliens
Right.
millions of years ago, they planted some kind of biological seed
Yeah.
on Earth.
That's Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, because he knows,
Right.
like every other scientist, that biological life doesn't leap into existence
Right.
from nothing.
It's got to come from other biological life.
Right. So, yeah, seed
So
of the plant.
space aliens is more
For them, yeah.
trustworthy than
Because space
narrative
aliens
of the
don't
scripture.
make demands on your life.
That's right.
Like God does.
They disappear
Right.
and they never come back.
God makes moral demands.
Right. Yeah.
And space aliens
Yeah.
don't. So yeah, I mean, we see this all over the place. Not even that's a big scale, but on a small scale. I mean, people justify it all the time. It's I don't think they get a direct revelation from Satan or demons, but there's definitely influence. You can hear the same things, like you sound like the devil. Did God actually say that you can't have sex before marriage? Well, but we're happy,
Right.
and God wants us to be happy. We're not hurting anybody. We love each other. All God really cares about is if we really love each other, and we do. We love each other. There's so many of these. Did God actually say divorce is a sin? Well, but you got married too young. You didn't make wise decisions. You married the wrong person.
Right.
You were just a kid. You're older now, and you're not happy, and you're young enough. You'll find someone else.
Yeah.
God wants you to be happy like that. He wants you to have a good family. So it's you see, and it's all kinds of things. Same thing with like homosexuality is a big one. Did God condemn homosexuality as an abomination? Did he really, or was that like just the culture that was talking back then?
Yeah.
Did God really feel that way? Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't really destroyed for that. It was because of hospitality, right? There's the counter truth.
Yeah.
This is about power dynamics. This is about abuse and power. So two consenting adults, God's happy with that. That's all that matters. And these could go on and on.
Right.
And that's the most common. Another most common is appeals to base human nature.
Yeah.
1 John 2:16, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life.
Right.
That's what's listed there.
Okay.
And if you just think about these things in your own life, how you've been tempted, it fits perfectly, right? The lust of the flesh, to be dominated by pleasure seeking. It's a lot of times it's sexual in nature, but a lot of times it's not. It's just to be satisfied in the things of the world. to kind of, some people jump from thing to thing, right? They fall in love with some new passion, gives them a lot of pleasure. Eventually it wears off. They'll fall into something new, give them a lot of pleasure and happiness. They'll fall into something new. That's the lust of the flesh.
Mm.
And that's, I mean, he's done this for millennia.
Yeah.
These strategies to the desires of the eyes, envy and covetousness. This is the reason why God forbids this in the Ten Commandments, because the road that envy and covetousness will lead to is like destructive in a whole range of.
I mean, we're seeing it in our own culture. I mean, that is what critical race theory is being driven by.
Mhm.
It's being driven by greed and envy.
Mhm.
Look at all the stuff that white people have. Well, we should have that too.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, you probably saw the Black Lives Matters person saying, loot, take whatever you want.
Right.
These companies, they've got insurance.
Right.
That's reparations.
Right.
She says that's reparations.
Right.
Like that's greed,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Just take what you need.
Yeah.
And it's driving a lot of this stuff.
Right. Yeah. Envy, covetousness, the desire of the eyes, to want more than what it's to not be satisfied in what God's given you.
Yeah.
Right. God's providentially placed you where you are, and when we're to learn to trust Him and to be satisfied in Him.
Yeah.
And the desires of the eyes, that's a tactic that's used to lead to a whole range. I mean, it can lead to terrible things, even murder, hatred, murder,
Right.
pride of life, to be self-sufficient in oneself. You don't need anyone or anything.
Right.
I've seen that attitude in people before, and that can go to even God. I don't need anyone or anything, including even God.
Yeah.
Or religious people, and this is why his tricks are so. He's so crafty, because just when you think you're doing so well and not falling into these common sins, you may start to think too highly of yourself, right? You say, well, look how much I've progressed in the Christian faith.
Right.
I don't sin. I don't do what they do.
Yeah.
And then you forget you have nothing apart from Christ. You're nothing.
Right.
Without Him, you'd be dead in your sins still.
Yeah.
And so the traps, they're so subtle many times and easy to fall into. These are the most common ones.
Okay. Well, how about common ones? So there's the most common ones that
Yeah.
we're just, even as Christians, we're battling these.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're a little less common, but
Right.
still we see it all over the place.
Yeah, common. So in this category, I put the propagation of idolatry and occultism,
Okay.
which people might think, well, that seems rare. But it's really not. Historically, if you look at the history of the world, every nation on the world has been engaged in idolatry and occultism.
And if we really think about what those elements are, we'll see how common they are,
Yeah.
even for Christians.
Yeah.
Right.
Even today.
Okay, so what do we mean by idolatry and occultism?
So Lloyd Jones, he was very helpful in this section because he did like 30 sermons on this passage.
Of course he did.
Now, I didn't listen to them all,
Yeah.
but I did. I couldn't resist listening to, I didn't listen to all of them, but I listened to some of them. He's got one on like spiritism and the occult, and I probably should go back and listen to them all. So they're very interesting. But idolatry is the worship of false gods,
Right.
or images.
Mm-hmm.
That's associated with it as well. The
And
worship
we're-
of false gods.
And we're not talking about I'm spending too much time in front of my TV.
No,
That's an idol.
right.
That is an idol
It is.
of the heart.
It's idolatry.
Right. And we,
yeah.
as Christians, we're always combating idols of the heart.
Mhm.
That would probably be up in the most common. We're talking about actual idols.
Yeah, actual
Right.
idols, actual false religions.
Yeah.
So, I mean, today you could go to India and walk into a temple and see an actual image
Right.
of a god,
Mhm.
or what they would say is a god.
Yeah.
People will be worshiping it. They'll
Right.
walk forever to go, and they'll bring like money and food and stuff and put it there,
Yeah.
valuable things. Now, so we transport ourselves back to the worldview to help us to understand this. Around the nations of Israel, every nation on the earth had gods. They had a pantheon of gods that they worshipped, and really a main deity as well that they would worship. And that Baal, Asherah, what's Moab's god?
Molech,
Chemosh.
Chemosh, and Molech.
Chemosh and Molech, and then there's all the gods of Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
numerous gods of Egypt.
Right.
And then you fast forward just a little bit, you have the whole Greek pantheon of
Mm-hmm.
gods. And then you have the whole Roman pantheon of gods. And
Right.
then, just a little ways up the way, you've got the Celtics and the crazy blue people. And then you've got the Nordic men worshiping Thor and Odin and
Right.
all this. And every society on the planet
Uh-huh.
has a pantheon of gods
Right.
that they worship. That could be a fun rabbit trail too, but I'm not going to chase it.
Okay.
But it's the worship of false gods.
Right.
Tied into this worship of false gods is, and even today this occurs in false religions, is the occult. Occultism is a practice of tapping into the spiritual realm to gain power.
Yeah.
To gain power in order that you can influence what happens in your present.
Yeah.
With a desire for your future.
Yeah.
And so tied into occultism is all kinds of strange things, which we'll get into. Really, at the heart of paganism and occultism is a desire to it's like a system, right? If I do these certain things, ball is going to make it rain. Our crops will flourish.
Right. You got to get his attention through cult prostitution.
Right.
Right. This is why God gave the third commandment: don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain.
Uh-huh.
A lot of it has to do with this occultism
Right.
of trying to appeal to the God's name to get them to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And God, Yahweh, he's not like that God. He's not like Baal that
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
have some kind of sexual relationship and he gets excited and makes it rain.
Yeah.
Like God, Yahweh is not like that.
Right. And an illustration might be like, Doctor Strange, the Marvel character,
Uh-huh.
where he will do like he may do a certain movement,
Yeah.
and it's able to unlock some power.
Yeah.
And he's drawing power from I don't even remember, another dimension.
Yeah.
Right. It's very much like that, because if you would say you go to Ares' temple, say you're a military commander, you're about to lead your soldiers into war.
Yeah.
Well, someone may hold a scroll up to, right?
Mhm.
And if you say these, they're literally magic words.
Yeah.
If you say these magic words and then perform the thing, you have to do it just right, though.
Yeah.
And if you do it just right, then you get the Ares blessing, and your enemies will be cursed.
Okay.
And you can, and we think, this stuff is just
What happens if
superstition.
your enemy does the same thing?
Yeah, I guess it's a battle.
Do they cancel each other out?
It's a battle of the false gods at that point.
Right.
But
This stuff doesn't happen anymore, though, right, Jay? Especially not in America.
right,
Like, we're too enlightened for this.
yeah,
We don't do magic.
yeah. So the whole desire is to control one, to do certain things to get the blessings of the gods, to control one's future. Whereas we're told that God is in control of everything in our life, and what we're to do is to rest and to trust in Him. Now, all of the stuff all around Israel, and even that goes on today, we think it's just superstition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this stuff it's not real. Cultism, tapping into spiritual power, is not real, right? But it is. God condemns it outright. It's forbidden. The worship of false gods is forbidden by God. It's not looked at as a superstition. What they practice and what they worship is called demons.
Mhm.
God calls them demons, right? These fallen interdimensional beings are what are behind these false gods. That's what's being worshipped. Deuteronomy 32 tells us that. Paul tells us that in 1 Corinthians 10, that this is demonic. And the occult part of it, tapping into spiritual power, is not a superstition. It actually happens,
Yeah.
and it's forbidden by God. And you can go to Deuteronomy, where is it? Deuteronomy 18, 9 through 12. And that's where God explicitly lists the practice of trying to tap into the spiritual realm to gain power from these beings. People did it.
Yeah.
And it's forbidden. So God says, when you come into the land that the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not learn to follow the abominable practices of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who burns his sons or his daughters as an offering, anyone who practices divination or tells fortunes, or who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or a charmer, or a medium, or a necromancer, or one who inquires of the dead. For the one who does these is an abomination, right? So these things happened. They're part of the ancient world, but they're not just part of the ancient world. They go on today.
Yeah.
And that's divination is the practice of seeking supernatural knowledge to understand what's going to happen in the future or to manipulate your present. And there are various techniques. Astrology. Then these are listed these happen in the Bible, by the way. Astrology.
Mm-hmm.
We know what that is, looking at the stars to tell one's future. That's horoscopes today.
And that's, I can't tell you how many times I've seen professing Christians post something about horoscopes.
Yeah.
Like, this is stuff that people are still treating at least semi-seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The king of Babylon has astrology. He has these people, astrologers. Right. They're all over. You know, they're in his den of magic men, if you can call it that. Right. Hepatoscopy is the practice of mutilating an animal and then staring at its entrails.
Right.
It's particularly the liver to get an omen, to interpret an omen. And that seems to be like worldwide, which is odd. Like, these things are worldwide. Well, maybe not so odd, because maybe they're influenced by the same demonic activity worldwide.
Right.
I mean, they did this stuff up, and they're doing this in the Middle East, but they're also doing it up in, Denmark and Norway.
Yeah.
So it's all over. There's rhabdominancy. It's where you take arrows or sticks and throw them out on the ground. And then you interpret the omen. Ezekiel 21 describes the king of Babylon doing all of this. Now, the people that do these things are called sorcerers, charmers, and mediums, or necromancers.
Yeah.
That's listed in the text. They're all forbidden. What's interesting is it appears somebody may be able to do all of them: sorcery, charming, be a medium, and a necromancer, or maybe just one. But they may be able to do all of them.
Yeah.
A sorcerer is another word for that would be witch or magician. That's I looked at the Hebrew of all these words. They're all different. They're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Pharaoh has these people, sorcerers, magicians.
Right.
They're tapping into the supernatural realm, a demon, and they're actually doing powerful displays of supernatural things.
Right.
They're mimicking Moses at first. This isn't like a sleight of hand. They're actually doing it.
They weren't keeping snakes up their sleeves?
Nope. Nope.
Okay.
It's supernatural.
Right.
Now the demonstration of what happens is between Moses and these magicians is who's God's more powerful.
Right.
Because God keeps upping the ante.
Yeah.
And then eventually the plagues happen.
Yeah.
And these magicians are powerless to stop the
eventually
plagues.
They're like, we can't do this.
Right. And what it shows is all these gods of Egypt are false gods.
Right.
There's one true and living God, and no one can oppose him.
Yeah. And the plagues are specifically targeted at the various gods of Egypt.
Yeah.
Like, God can do this.
It's
Your God can't do it.
Yeah. It's very interesting the way God does this.
Yeah.
It's spiritual warfare. Now, a charmer is somebody who would infuse power into an object. Like, it's more than a good luck charm. That's what it is. It's a good luck charm. It's a charm, right?
Right.
It's forbidden in the Bible. You can go into all kinds of places today and buy charms that have been supposedly infused with magic, crystals, and all kinds of weird things. Stuff still happens today.
Yeah.
There's mediums. That's different. A medium is someone who can channel a god, which we know is not. It's a demon.
Right.
But they can channel a god for supernatural power. So in Acts 16, this girl is said to have a python spirit. So the root of that, if you follow what that means, is she's said to have the same spirit that the Oracle of Delphi had.
Okay.
That's what's being claimed. And it's probably true, because she's apparently interpreting the future.
Okay.
And she's a slave girl, making her owners very wealthy. So she's channeled as a medium some supernatural being. She tells the future. Paul recognizes what's going on, casts the demon out of this girl.
Yeah.
And she can't do it anymore.
Right.
And then her slave
They
owner,
get mad.
they're really mad about it. Acts 16.
I have.
That's a medium.
Right.
Necromancer is someone who reaches out to the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all these are forbidden. All of them still happen today. That's what's interesting.
Yeah. Not in Lawton, Oklahoma, though, right, Jay?
Yeah, yeah. But
did you know that there's a magic shop here?
I didn't know that.
It's called Curious Goods. It's on
Interesting.
Ferris. It's on Ferris Avenue.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting.
I'm on their site right now, and they sell tarot cards, oracle and ruins.
Yeah, there you go. Ruins,
stones,
charmers.
statues, incense, books. I wonder what kind of books they sell. Jay?
I don't know.
Maybe magic books.
Maybe.
Altar and ritual tools.
Yeah.
That's here in Lawton, Oklahoma, Southwest Oklahoma. We've got a bazillion churches.
Yeah.
And you got this Nordic paganism is on the rise massively.
Yeah.
Of this.
Let's take a break.
Okay.
And we'll come right back and pick it up.
Okay.
All right. We're back from break. Sorry about that.
All right.
Yeah,
all right. That was a little sudden.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we were talking about the kind of the Norse paganism that's on the rise.
Yeah.
We've got some brothers here at the church that have talked to a guy here in town that he's got an altar. Like he's got a pagan altar. He thinks that Odin and Thor, like these are real guys.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre stuff. Like, but this is still going on.
Yeah.
This is not something that happened 1,000 years ago. This is happening today in America.
Yeah.
And it is on the rise. Can I drop a bomb, Jay?
What?
I mean, we've talked about this before.
Uh-huh.
Why do the Black Lives Matters? Why are they always so heavy on say their name?
Oh yeah. That's right. I
Like,
forgot all about this.
Is that just to remember them?
Well, that's not what they say.
That's not what they say.
Yeah. Tell us what
This is part of African paganism.
That is.
They think they're tapping into their ancestors.
That's what she said. What is her name?
The founders
of
Black Lives Matter, they have explicitly said they practice magic.
Yes, that's why they chant their name, say their name,
say their name, because this is part of African tribal paganism,
and they're drawing the power
from
of
their ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when Christians are being brought into this, and they're saying that they're using the same rhetoric of say their name, like they are becoming partners, even if they're unknowingly becoming partners with occultism.
Yeah.
This is not innocent stuff.
Right. I have an image in my mind of seeing Lecrae do it. Do you remember when Lecrae marched and he was doing the say their name stuff? He's screaming it, say their name.
Yeah.
And they're chanting their name or whatever.
You've seen the video of the Black Lives Matters rally where all these people are sitting gathered, and they've got their hand.
They're prostrate on the ground.
They've got their hands up, right?
Their hands are in the air and they're chanting.
Yeah.
Like the person is leading them in like a chant.
Yeah.
And their hands are up. It looks like what you would imagine you'd see in a pagan temple.
Right.
And they're all repeating the same phrase that they're being told to say.
Yeah. So it's this subtle reintroduction, I guess, of paganism into our society, and people are unknowingly becoming involved in this stuff.
Right. All the schemes and strategies.
Right.
Of the devil.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the necromancers, mediums, charmers, sorcerers.
So
the stuff. The Bible doesn't talk about this as superstitions.
Right.
It talks about it as people doing this.
Yeah.
And them being like a gateway to the other realm.
Yeah, magic. It's not this Disney, this Disney fairy tale stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the Bible seems to present magic as something that some people are actually able to do.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not like it's portrayed in movies.
Right.
It's more of tapping into this spiritual realm where there are spiritual beings, and it's not you're not tapping into Gabriel. right?
Right.
You're tapping into a Molech.
You're right. Yeah, you are. And the use of mind-altering drugs has been used for
Mm-hmm.
going back forever in humanity to
Yeah.
to facilitate and to help to do this.
You talked about this in the sermon. We should play it if you have it available.
Mm.
The of Danica Patrick.
Yeah.
She's NASCAR driver. What is she? Is she the first female NASCAR driver, or is she just the
I
most?
think I think she was the first. I think she was the
one.
one. She like broke the ceiling or whatever.
Okay,
you know,
so
because
she is she's famous. I mean, she's done commercials and all kinds of stuff. But you shared a clip with me of her actually talking
Yeah.
to an interdimensional being
Yeah. Yeah.
and being advised by this interdimensional being.
Yeah, this is going to trip everybody out because the link. This is how this stuff links to the modern UFO phenomenon.
Okay.
The UAPs
Uh-huh.
that they're calling them now, but yeah, I'll pull up that I sent you. I'll play it right now on the air.
Okay. It's
All
because
you'll hear is the audio. I'll hold it up.
yeah.
I'm gonna hold it up here to the microphone. Hopefully, it'll come through. But yeah, you can go to her podcast, the
Okay.
Danica Patrick podcast,
Uh-huh.
and it's the one where she talks to Dr. Stephen Greer, who we'll talk about in a second.
Okay.
Let's see if you can hear this.
Is that I exist in other planetary systems, in other dimensions. I have guides that are from other dimensions helping me, and that's happening all across the world, and that they're here to help guide us into the continuing to be the next state of consciousness. And when we finally become a peaceful planet, then just like you said, I heard that we become the next group of extraterrestrial that then go into other planetary systems.
That's wild stuff, man.
Yeah, Danica Patrick is a mainstream person,
Yes.
right? NASCAR is the most popular sport in America.
Uh-huh.
Okay, way more than baseball and football
Yeah.
and basketball.
Right. Which blows my mind. I don't understand it.
She's what's called an influencer. She has through social media, people like her have the ability to influence and spread their ideas to millions of people. Another one is Demi Lovato, who's a singer, famous singer, and she has the same experience through meditation at a place called Joshua Tree, which I'm guessing is some state park somewhere or something, some isolated place. Yeah. Her and her friends were doing meditation and seeking to access these beings, and they did.
Yeah.
And she's taken pictures and posted it on her Instagram of these. It just looks like energy almost.
Okay.
You can't really tell exactly what it is, and she says the same thing, that this was a spiritual awakening for her when she was contacted.
Wow.
With these beings, and not long after that, she came out as non-binary.
Yeah. So we've talked about Genesis 6 on here before of the sons of God, most likely fallen angels, having sexual relationships with human women and the Nephilim, and so there's been this interaction between heavenly beings, spiritual beings, and humans before. Can you imagine if spiritual beings, glorious ones, showed up in quote unquote spaceship,
right,
and said, we're here to usher you into a higher realm, a higher level of thinking.
We're bringing you into your next evolutionary stage.
Like the whole world would
right.
follow them, right?
Right, and that's what Stephen Greer, who's the person who influenced Danica Patrick and Lovato, he's maybe the most, he's the UFO guy. He's been studying UFOs for apparently like 3 decades.
Yeah.
He was a doctor. Guy was a doctor. He worked in an ER. He
Yeah.
did trauma surgery and all kinds of stuff. And he left all of that because of the contact he had with these beings. So he created this technique, and if you listen to him describe it, really it's based in Eastern mysticism. And the idea, it's pantheism, really. The idea that there's a universal consciousness to the universe, and because we're conscious, we have a consciousness. We're conscious. These beings are conscious. We're able to directly connect with them. So he said, after he's had numerous encounters, he said, I quit my medical practice because my role is to become an ambassador and to help other people to become ambassadors so that we can get humanity connected with these beings. And he says, what they have told me is that when we do this, like when enough people, I guess, are engaged with them, that they'll usher us into the next level of being.
Wow.
That we'll enter a time of peace and prosperity. There'll be no hunger. There'll be no crime. There'll be no oppression. There'll be unity. And so I'm thinking these beings, and I don't think this, I think he's telling the truth. I think he has direct contact with them. They're offering the kingdom without the king.
Yeah.
That's what they're offering. They're offering the kingdom without Jesus, or they're trying to. They can't deliver, but that's it's another gospel.
Yeah. Now we're talking about this stuff, and it's so unusual.
It's so weird. It's so crazy.
And Christians probably don't. We've been programmed to hear this stuff from non-believers and say these guys are kooks.
Yes.
And some people may be listening to us and thinking these guys have gone off the deep end.
Right.
But if we're tying this into the spiritual reality,
right,
and if we're remembering our eschatology,
the
scriptures seem to point to a man of lawlessness. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2.
Yes.
The world is going to be given over to delusions, and they're going to believe lies. Right, the man of lawlessness is even going to be able to perform supernatural signs, right? And the whole world's going to go after him,
right?
Who's not going to go after him? Christians, right?
Yeah,
like believers are going to say, "This is a lie."
Yeah.
What we're talking is not space aliens. We're talking about demons. We're talking about the schemes of the devil to deceive not just little pockets, but the whole world. And Christians are not going to fall for the lie. And so in order for this next level, in order for the world to enter into this peace and prosperity, who's got to go?
The Christians.
Right. It's got the Christians are the ones that are holding us back. And you can tie this into our eschatology.
Yeah.
Like the final rebellion against God, the final persecution, and just when I think, if I'm reading Revelation correctly, which is always up in the air, if I'm reading it correctly, just when the world thinks that they're going to snuff out Christianity, Christ comes back.
Right. Yeah.
So
you mean the Lord who's a warrior?
That's right, the one who has a sharp two-edged sword
who
coming out.
Who is pictured in the Old Testament as wearing armor.
Right.
Who we're told to put on his armor.
Right.
We'll get into that next time.
Yeah.
Next time
but this again, I'm not. I don't want to. We're not being these end times conspiracy theories where we've got it all mapped out and it's just a couple of years from now, and
right.
I mean, we don't know. But at least to kind of have a biblical worldview and see that again, like you said. I think that the main point behind all of this is the sufficiency of Scripture.
Right.
Like the world is going to see UFO. We need to have a biblical category for this and know that the Scriptures speak to these issues, even if it doesn't talk about unidentified flying objects. We do have a category for that. The Scripture is sufficient for us. God has granted to us all things pertaining to life and godliness. The Scriptures are God-breathed and they're profitable so that we might be complete. And so we have a category for this, and this, I think, fits into our biblical cosmology. But I also think that we're seeing eschatological stuff going on.
For sure, we are. And again, you've got to resist the urge to think about this like a materialist.
Right.
This that what we're talking about, we're still on the common.
Yeah.
Common, widespread deception.
Yeah.
And if you look in the past, how has the enemy engaged in this? Well, it's to have people believe in supernatural beings, Thor, Baal, and if we do certain things, they will prosper our community. right? It's this.
Yeah.
So, but we're too enlightened now to believe in guys that hurl thunderbolts.
So there's
So-
you see this in the Old Testament. Ahab and Jezebel, they're worshiping Baal, who's the god of rain. Elijah has prayed and said, Yahweh says you're not going to have rain for 3 years. Why do they hate Elijah and Yahweh? Because they think they're an enemy to us getting rain.
Right.
Instead of saying, well, Baal isn't the god of rain, it actually is Yahweh, and going and serving him, they say he's an enemy. And when Ahab finally sees Elijah, he says, is it you, the troublemaker of Israel?
Right.
Right.
He's the troublemaker.
So we can't, again, we can't think in this materialistic view. We're in the West in the 21st century, and we're surrounded by technology, and we think we're too sophisticated to fall for this stuff. The devil's schemes, they're going to change a little bit to fit into our categories. So we think of technology now, and so maybe the devil is going to have a scheme that it looks like UFOs,
Right. Yeah.
but it's still a scheme of the evil one to deceive people so that they're not trusting in the gospel.
Yeah.
They're going to be trusting in these interdimensional beings. They may not be praying to the dead, but they may be praying to interdimensional beings, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's just reworked a little bit for 21st century America.
I was shocked when I saw the Danica Patrick thing because again, the stereotype. This is a Southern girl. Well, what do you think about a Southern girl?
Yeah,
She's grown up in the Bible Belt, probably.
right.
She's talking about being guided by interdimensional beings. George.
Right.
This is not like we think. Oh, that some kooks are into that. That's
Right.
hippie stuff. This Dr. Stephen Greer influenced her. She influences others. He made an app that's it's worldwide. It's on Google Play. It's on Amazon. It's on iTunes. They still do iTunes.
Yeah.
Apple still. And his whole purpose is to teach people to these techniques so that they can communicate and have access and encounters with these beings. He's trying to teach them all to become mediums.
Right.
It's
just being repackaged for our 21st century technological age. But it's the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same stuff. So we've got to have this spiritual, supernatural mindset. We've got to have a biblical worldview of the biblical cosmology, because the schemes that they may look a little bit different, but it's the same stuff.
Yeah,
it's the same stuff. And so we've got to, you hear this stuff of her talking to an interdimensional being, and they may have this category of aliens. We go back to Deuteronomy, where God is telling Israel not to talk to dead people. It's the same thing. So we have a biblical category, and they're not actually talking to dead people.
Right.
They're talking to demons that are impersonating their grandpa. Right.
Right.
So we've got to have a biblical category.
You're right. And those are in the common realm.
Okay. And people are thinking that's not common. It is. It absolutely is.
In the history of man, that's common.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
The rare.
Okay,
That's where we go now.
Let's talk about the
The
rare.
rare we classify as explicit displays of evil supernatural power.
Okay.
Again, in the West, we're not going to see these because the tactic in the West is for people not to believe in supernatural evil.
Okay.
Because we'll connect the dots, right? Like, imagine if you saw a demon-possessed person with supernatural strength, unable to be contained or chained by anyone. They can break any bond that you place them in. Imagine if you were to see that and they were to do supernatural feats and the demon talks through their mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Well, people are going to go, hold up. Like, evil exists.
Yeah.
Maybe there's good, and maybe what the Bible says that there's one who comes to crush the serpent's head. Maybe he's real. Maybe Jesus actually did die on the cross to set us free, and maybe then now I believe in him. Right?
Yeah, we're conditioned to only think of this in terms of Hollywood. Like these are just movies, right? These are just Stephen King novels. This isn't actual reality.
Yeah.
And so you're right. The devil, he is hyper intelligent, and he he knows how to deceive, and so he knows all the right tactics.
Yeah.
So he's like the Uber general,
Yeah.
right? He's like Alexander the Great to the umpteenth degree. Like he knows how to conquer.
It'd be a poor tactic to use here.
Yeah.
But this stuff still occurs in other parts of the world, third world countries.
Yeah.
It's occurring. It occurs there. It happened all the time in the Bible.
Right.
Demonic possession, right? Don't buy into, well, hey, they were just having seizures and they didn't know what was going on. Right.
Yeah.
I think people knew the difference even back. People aren't stupid back then. We talk about ancient people like they're stupid.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure they know what a seizure is, and then if they see someone that's like talking, and it's not the person talking anymore,
Yeah.
and not only that, they have superhuman strength. Like that's different.
Right.
People have seizures that they don't talk to you.
Yeah.
It's demonic possession, and so Jesus' ministry, he regularly cast out demons, and that's a picture of his kingdom coming into conflict
Right.
with the kingdom of darkness.
Right.
That he's plundering even before we get to the cross, and that's how Jesus explains it. That if the only way that you can plunder the strong man's goods is to bind the strong man.
Yeah.
That's kind of the metaphor he uses of casting a demon out of someone. He binds the strong man, he plunders his goods.
Yeah.
And that's what he's doing. He's plundering the kingdom of darkness.
Yeah.
And as he demonstrates, he has power over evil. Yet the evil ones must obey Christ because he has that much authority.
Right.
They're even afraid of him. They'll fall down before him.
Because
they'll
again,
prostrate themselves.
right.
before
Because
him.
again, the Son is not like another angel.
Right. Right. And so the kingdom's plundering is the kingdom of Satan is being plundered by Christ even before he gets to the cross.
Right.
So those would be rare. Now those rare things do still occur in the world, demonic possession and maybe even hauntings and things like that you would think of.
So now we're talking about ghosts, Jay. Is that the direction we're going?
I don't think that they are ghosts. I think they're these beings.
Yeah.
But those would be rare.
Yeah.
The other rare one that I put, again, I'm not like the expert demonologist guy. These are just the categories I put them in to help me wrap my brain around them.
Yeah.
So other widespread, rare, explicit displays, I think, of evil happened on two occasions. And Paul warned about it in Galatians. He said, even if an angel from heaven are to preach to you a gospel contrary to the one we preach to you, let them be accursed. So don't believe even if an angel, one of these glorious ones, appears to you.
Now, Paul was just using hyperbole, right? Like angels don't actually come and preach to people, right?
There are people that would believe that, I guess. But.
Well, I mean, you gave two examples, and
did.
I think you're right.
It's
I think you're at least right with the first one that you gave.
Right. Yeah.
Which happened.
It happened in the 7th century in the Middle East. Muhammad was meditating. There seems to be a theme with meditation. With meditation and these beings.
Yeah.
He's meditating in a cave on a mountain, and he's visited by an angel named Jibril. Now, the encounter is interesting because he's seized, and he feels like he's being crushed to death, which is also a common thing of demon possession. When people are possessed, they feel like they're being crushed. He feels like he's going to be crushed to death. And he tells his family that he thinks that he was demon possessed.
Yeah.
This has been recorded by Muslims.
Yeah.
This is not just like making stuff up.
Like he wrote this, right? He told his own story, didn't he?
Well, that part was recorded. I don't know if he wrote it.
Okay.
He was recorded and passed down.
Okay.
His family convinced him, no, you've received divine revelation from God.
Yeah.
So he changed, he said, okay, well, maybe that's right. Went along with that. And that's the beginning of Islam.
Yeah.
Right?
And then he set off to conquer the world.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds exactly like divine revelation.
Yep.
Right?
And then the Mormon religion.
Yeah.
Both of these have deceived millions.
Now this one is a little more suspect, but he does claim to have been visited by an angel.
Yeah, Joseph Smith
Right.
claims to have been visited by the angel Moroni.
Moroni.
I believe 22 times.
Now the problem with Joseph Smith is that he seems to be a notorious liar because
Right,
because
yeah.
his story changes. He sees Jesus, and then he sees Jesus and the Father, and
Yeah.
his story changes. Interestingly enough, apparently Joseph Smith was into magic
Yeah.
before he had this encounter,
Right.
and was told that all branches of Christianity have been corrupted.
Right.
Like, oh well, I wonder who would tell him something like that.
Yeah.
So revolutionary.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it could be that I the founding of Islam and the founding of Mormonism, both coming from supposed angels
Mm-hmm.
giving messages. Yeah, and so millions have been deceived by
Yeah.
maybe the preaching of demons,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
of angels actually coming and preaching another gospel.
Mm-hmm. So those would be the very rare.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so those are the main ones. So
All right. Well, we've talked about all this. I mean, if people have never thought about this before, if these are new categories for them, they're probably trying to wrap their brains around this.
oh yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Because we have been kind of conditioned to think in a certain way in the West, and we're above this, and we know this stuff isn't real, and so why are we even talking about this? So you gave three reasons why you think that this is, a threat.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that real quick.
So I'm trying to think, okay, this UFO stuff and people see these videos.
Mhm.
What are, we have an enemy. He's like always 100 moves ahead of us because
Yeah.
he's like a grandmaster chess player.
Right.
What's going on? Like, what are they? Is he doing it, or demons doing it, demonic activity? Don't know if it is or not.
Yeah.
But how is it likely to be used? I think number one is the destruction of people's faith. He wants to destroy people's trust in the Bible, and I think it will happen.
Yeah.
People will see this stuff, and they'll immediately go, technology, highly sophisticated beings not from Earth. God never talked about that.
Yeah.
Can I even trust God? Is the Bible all fake? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That trail, people will go down that trail. Hopefully not. If they listen to this, they won't now. But that's one. I didn't want that to happen to anybody in our church.
Right.
So just get it out there in the open.
Yeah.
Right up front. Number two, there's a counter narrative possibly will be presented, a counter materialist narrative,
Okay.
which you can kind of see already coming from Danica Patrick
Right.
and Stephen Greer. That there are beings out there that want to usher us into another phase of human existence
Mhm.
where there's no crime, there's no suffering anymore,
Yeah.
and they'll do that for us. That is a real possibility.
Right.
And in that materialist scenario, I could see like us believing all there is intelligences in the universe, and so we leave what we would call religion behind altogether
Right.
when we enter this
Mhm.
phase of super secular humanism or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the third one would be possibly they're presented as like, hey, there's a fake existential threat to mankind,
Yeah.
and so we've got to unite as a world. So
Like an Independence Day scenario.
yeah. And so as we unite as a world, it sets the stage for perhaps this man of lawlessness
Okay.
to control and have total domination over everything.
Okay.
I don't know. That again, that's speculation on my
Right.
part. Number
Right.
one, I don't think it's speculation at all. The goal is to destroy people's faith.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where do we go from here, Jay? I mean, what?
You got to put on the armor of God, George.
Okay.
That's where we go. So that'll come up here in 2 weeks. We'll do
Okay.
that. We'll go through the passage,
Yeah.
putting on the armor of God.
So we're this is a lot of wild stuff.
Yeah.
And it can be maybe a little overwhelming, but we come back to the sufficiency of Scripture.
Yeah.
This isn't changing the message of the Scripture. It's not changing the overarching story of the Scripture. It simply is emphasizing something that we have de-emphasized for so long, and that's the spiritual realm. That there actually is a spiritual realm. Angels and demons, the devil, these are not mythological creatures. These are not just symbols, metaphors. They actually are real. There actually is a conflict because the devil and his angels are actually in rebellion against God.
Yes.
And they have deceived mankind into joining into that rebellion. And they have schemes, and there is supernatural elements to those schemes. Like we're not living in just an empirical world, a materialistic world.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to remember in all of this that that Christ has already been victorious over all of these forces of evil and darkness, even the evil one himself. 1 John 3:8 says, "The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the works of the devil."
Yeah.
And he did crush his head. The prophecy was fulfilled.
Right.
At the cross, Christ triumphed over all of these. Colossians, as you mentioned earlier, Colossians 2:13-15, which it does. We should always remember the propitiation of Christ, right? That we emphasize that a lot. That substitutionary atonement, that Christ died for our sins to reconcile us to God. But another component is the victory, the victory of Christ, Christ the victor, and that He has conquered over all of these, all of His enemies. And he's crushed the devil's head. The devil is like a wounded animal. Like think of an animal that's been shot on a hunt or something. Like if you shot a bear and he's running around in the wild, you probably would not approach.
I like how
don't approach because you're gonna be attacked.
Yeah.
And so he's got a mortal wound to his head. He's dying, and right now he is in a rage.
Yeah.
Right.
I like how David Chilton in his Revelation commentary talking about Revelation 12, the devil has been cast out of heaven and he's on a rampage. He describes him as like this gangster on the run, like this deposed gangster. His empire's falling apart. And so what does he do? Does he turn himself in? No, he goes Bonnie and Clyde right on this this rampage.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the devil is doing.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like the Joker on a massive scale. Just wants to see the world burn as he goes down.
Yeah. Right.
But what's interesting to me is this passage in Romans 16:20.
Yeah.
Is that though Christ has crushed his head, Paul then uses that terminology now to apply to the ongoing work of the church in the world.
Right.
And it emphasizes the importance of the church. Like we're to put on the armor of God and stand against the schemes of the devil. But the local church is the place where this is occurring. You don't be on your own.
Right.
You don't stand a chance on your own. There's no Rambos, right? We've said it before. Rambo is not a real thing in the military, and it's not in the Christian life. Romans 16:20 says, "The God of peace will soon crush Satan under your feet." That's to the church.
We actually take part in the victory of Christ. Yeah. He's the one that crushes the devil, but by union with Christ, we also get to crush the devil. I'm reminded of 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. Everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith.
Yeah.
So we're part of this.
Yep.
And it's all because of God's grace to us in Christ. Yep. All right, Jay. Well, it's definitely been an interesting one. Right. I hope that this has been helpful for you. As we're again trying to show the sufficiency of Scripture. The Scriptures, they speak to these issues, and they're reminding us of the supernatural elements that are in God's creation, and how are Christians supposed to respond to it. So hopefully this has been helpful. I encourage you again, go back and listen to Jay's sermon, and this is supposed to help us to become more and more conformed to Christ. So until next time, Jay, live long and prosper.
Nice.